Hello. On behalf of the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library, I would like to welcome you to the Security Elements of Postage Stamps, Part 2. My name is Eric Carlson. In the first part of Security Elements of Stamps, we reviewed measures intended to prevent reuse and theft of stamps. In this part, we will discuss methods to prevent counterfeiting of stamps. Counterfeiters are the artists of the criminal world. They can produce a replica good enough to fool a postal clerk, and the truly talented create stamps intended to pass the eye of an expert. Join with me now as we look at some examples of counterfeit stamps and describe some of the many techniques used by stamp issuing entities to deter counterfeiting. Watermark paper has been used since the first adhesive stamp, the penny black, was issued. Watermarks are impressed into the paper during its production. The paper is then kept secure in a controlled environment until the stamp is printed. In this way, it is more difficult to replicate the stamp. Watermarks cannot be counterfeited, but once postage stamps are affixed to an envelope or package, it is no longer possible to determine if the watermark is present. Another early measure adopted the use of paper not readily available to the public. The Austrian and Swiss governments used granite paper, which contained short colored fibers. Like watermark paper, it was also kept secure in a controlled environment until the stamp was printed. Burlage is a pattern of fine wavy lines printed on the front or back of some stamps. The fine and intricate design makes counterfeiting more difficult. Toward the end of 1930, Venezuela decided that the security risk of its current stamps was too great and had its stamps printed on Winchester security paper. This paper is distinguished by blue concentric arcs interspersed with a shield bearing the words Winchester security paper, pre-printed on the paper. Once a stamp is affixed, visual inspection is the only means to determine the authenticity of the stamp. In the celebrated Chicago counterfeit stamp case of 1895, the counterfeiters were so good that one newspaper said it was best to lick the stamp, and if it stuck to the paper, it was counterfeit. The gum being used by the U.S. government at the time was subject to ridicule by many postal customers. As good as the counterfeiters were, differences still existed and could be seen. Throughout the years, counterfeiters have produced popular stamps. The lack of fine detail was the primary identifier of the fake. Another measure that is apparent on the stamp face is a stamp design technique known as engine turning. This is an intricate lattice work which is difficult for counterfeiters to replicate. While engine turning was difficult to replicate, so were extremely small letters and numbers. Beginning in 1935, Canadian stamps were issued containing hidden years. While one of the 1935 issues was somewhat difficult to find, later issues were sometimes easier and sometimes more difficult to find. This printing method makes a magnifying glass an essential tool. The U.S. and China have issued stamps with secret marks. While intended to indicate the printer, they also serve to deter the counterfeiter because replication was difficult. The stamp design can sometimes contain obscure elements. On the New Zealand stamp, note the Morse code that constitutes the border. It translates to New Zealand Health 2 times around the border. This U.S. stamp reveals tiny images of modes of transportation such as horseback and covered wagon, camel, military tank, and motor vehicle, to name just a few. These elements are hard to replicate. In a bit of irony, sometimes hidden elements have been kept secret from the issuing government. The engraver Thomas Hipschen hid his last name in the circle on the handle of the rubber stamp. Another engraver, Kenneth Kipperman, caused a stir when he hid the Star of David in the beard of Bernard Revel. Hidden, secret, or obscure features are important. First, because they are hard to replicate, and secondly, they can be used by the investigator to identify counterfeits. Modern technology allows the counterfeiter to copy the original, including the hidden, secret, and obscure features. The stamp issuing entities were forced to develop modern anti-counterfeiting tools such as microprinting, holograms, tagging, hidden images, complexity, and special perforations. Microprinting is an anti-counterfeiting feature. The small size makes it very difficult to reproduce accurately. Holograms are photographic images that are three-dimensional. When imprinted on postage stamps, they can appear as changing images and/or changing colors when viewed from different angles. The first hologram stamp was issued in Austria in 1988. Since then, approximately 80 countries have issued hologram stamps. Holograms with their visually pleasing effects are difficult for the counterfeiter to reproduce. As the volume of mail and cost of processing increased, it became apparent to many stamp issuing entities that they needed a method of processing the mail at high speed. The idea of tagging stamps was introduced. Stamps were tagged using special chemicals and inks. The stamp was run beneath an ultraviolet light. If the tag was seen, the letter proceeded. While initially adopted as a mail processing tool, the tag is also considered a counterfeit deterrent since it is part of a legitimate stamp. During the years 1997 to 2004, the United States Post Office produced nearly 1.75 billion postage stamps that contain a hidden image. These covert designs are only visible when viewed through a special device called a stamp decoder. By creating 50 different designs in one sheet, the Postal Service considers this a deterrent to counterfeiting. The special perforation, which is elliptical, is proprietary and deters counterfeiting. The elliptical slits also provide protection. In 1997, Canada Post released a steel-engraved definitive issue depicting the grizzly bear. The number 8 was incorporated into the bear's rear right limb. In addition, the green grass below and the blue sky above use tiny images of bears. This brings us to a masterpiece in security technology. Because this is a 10-pound stamp, it has been loaded with security. Note the following: Granite Paper, the oval, elliptical, or syncopated perforations, optically variable ink inside used to print the hologram of the Queen's profile, microprinting, embossed braille letters, and phosphorescent tagging. So how do you know if a stamp is an original or a counterfeit? You need to examine the following: watermarks, the type of paper, the perforation size and shape. Beware of imperfect stamps made from perforated stamps. The clarity and the detail of the image, and the presence of security features such as tagging, microprinting, and hidden marks. Our thanks to Steve Dixon for sharing with us his work on stamp security features. On behalf of the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library, I'd like to thank you for watching this segment of the Elements of Stamp Security. Please take time to view our other video offerings available on our website.